So now we're looking at measurement validity, and this just basically means that we're looking at the validity of what you're using to capture information. There's validity that has to do with your results. This has to do with your measurement, and validity in general terms is going to refer to that idea of, again, can you trust that your results actually did capture what you wanted them to capture? So just to kind of get you warmed up to the concept, there's a podcast where you can kind of see how does this have to do, for example, in the way that the census captures same-sex couples. There's some huge issues to measurement validity and the way that the census asks that information that doesn't really let us get good data out of the census, or as good a data as we could get. And then there's a video overview as well if you want a different video covering the concept. So what in other words, we want to know, again, is this measuring what it claims to be measuring? There's 5 generally different types of measurement validity that we're going to look at, and we're going to look at examples of each one. This is probably one of the more complex sections of this, and so just make sure that as you're going through, you can kind of figure out what's the underlying question that each type of validity tries to answer, and how would you look for that? Why is that important? So keep that in mind as you're going through, rather than just trying to memorize the type of validity and what it means. As an example, if you like podcasts, I also wanted to show you this. American Life had a nice podcast about this. You can play this in the radio. But think about it. What if there was a test to determine if you were a psychopath? Imagine what that test would include. How would you know whether that test could really capture whether you're a psychopath or not? What would it ask, and how could you make sure that if it did come back and say you're a psychopath, does that really mean you would be a psychopath? Go online and check it out and see if you even get a chance to take the test and share your results. So this just gives you the definition, but we're going to go through and look at each one in more detail. So face validity. Face validity is basically, what does it look like on the surface? This is a judgment call. If I'm asking about substance abuse, or if I want to measure substance abuse, but I'm asking questions about the number of times that you finish your homework on time, just on the surface doesn't really seem valid to me. So usually this is just, again, quick judgment call. Then you look at content validity. So this has to do with what's already out there. So there's already going to be a lot of different literature published on depression. So content validity means I want to compare what I'm doing, the information about what I'm trying to measure, against what's already been published out there, and to see if it lines up together. Criterion validity means that there's just a general rule, and maybe there's a rule and a standard that I want to hold up and see if my information works. So this is observable or empirical. So let's say I'm taking a driver's test, but let's say that I also crashed my car. If people that make hundreds on their driver's tests can also be found that they're not crashing their cars, then that's probably a good criterion. Just remember the word criterion is singular for criteria. That's probably a good criterion to know that it's a good measure of driving skills. But if people are getting hundreds in their driving test or driving license exam, but they're still crashing their cars, then that tells me that that driving license exam does not have criterion validity. So there's 3 subtypes for this one, and we're going to look at each one as far as criterion validity goes. So in predictive validity, you're basically wanting to figure out, can you predict it? So if I take this test and I make 100, then, or if I take this class and I make an A, does that predict that I'm going to graduate? So if you see that people that are taking this class are graduating, and then that might be, you can use it to predict. But if there's really no relationship there, then it might not have predictive validity. Then you might also want to look at concurrent validity. Again, in the previous example, you look at graduation. Let's look at the SAT. The SAT is supposed to distinguish between people that have college readiness and people that don't have college readiness. But if the same 2 groups of people are going to college, if people that failed the SAT are going to college and people that passed the SAT are going to college, and they're both doing equally well in college, then the SAT does not have concurrent validity, because it can't distinguish between those people that are supposed to do well and those people that are not supposed to do well. Now, different types of validity is called construct, and there's 2 subtypes there, so let's look at what those mean. So construct validity in general means that I'm capturing everything. If I'm measuring depression, am I really measuring depression or am I measuring substance abuse? I want to make sure I keep those separate. Am I measuring just the social aspects of depression or the cognitive aspects as well? So contract validity means I'm capturing all those different details about what depression is, about what substance abuse is, but that's it. I'm not measuring anything else. It has to do with the general social idea of what that represents. So when you look at that, when you look at this type of validity, that means that the different ways in which you capture, which you measure depression, those different subgroups should be working together. So social forms of depression should be correlating with cognitive manifestations of it. And if it has nothing to do with each other, it shouldn't be related. So you shouldn't see one thing going up when depression goes up if it has nothing to do with it. A final type of validity is factor validity, and this basically says we want to make sure that sometimes there are measurement tools that are supposed to measure more than one factor, more than one dimension. So if I'm looking at depression, but I'm looking at multiple things being captured in that, then I want to look at some statistics called factor analysis, which we won't cover in this class, but just make sure that you could just connect that idea of factor validity to factor analysis. All the sub things should be connected with each other. So this is just a quick summary of the different ways in which you want to capture validity, the different forms. And at the same time, just remember the relationship between reliability and validity. So this is basically the nice way to measure. Something's reliable if it's consistent, but it's not valid if it doesn't hit what it's supposed to hit. And here you want to hit the bullseye. This measure is not reliable because it's not consistent, but it's also not hitting the bullseye, so it's not valid. This is consistently in the same place and it's hitting where it's supposed to hit in the bullseye, so this measurement would be valid and reliable.